It's my pleasure to introduce today's preacher, who has left such an imprint on our seminary community over the last 5 years that I think many of you will not recognize the place once she has graduated. She has achieved an MDiv degree, all while birthing and mothering 2 children, remaining vitally married to 1 husband, and has distinguished herself by landing herself a head pastor job at a local church before even graduating. She is the pastor at Second Congregational Church in Peabody, Massachusetts. And what some of you may not know about her is that before engaging in the oral art form of preaching here at Gordon-Conwell, she was a nationally recognized poet in her home country of Australia, as well as She was a member of a band. She toured. She was cool. Still is. But the thing I appreciate most about today's preacher is that she's the kind of person who consistently brings joy, wonder, and curiosity into my life. She is one of the brightest lights in my life and one of the greatest lovers of Jesus I know. Please welcome Pastor Alison Gerber.
When Dr. Price said, Hillary is going to announce you, I thought, oh no, she's going to say, her dad's name is Harold, her dad's. I thought for sure that was going to come up. Oh, thank you for inviting me, Dr. Price, to preach. It's a great privilege to stand on this stage behind this pulpit where I first heard my hero, Haddon Robinson, preach 7 years ago. I miss that guy. Who here knows what it is to wait? Do you know what it is to wait? My daughter Ivy, she's 5 years old. She doesn't like waiting. One night she prayed, "Dear Lord Jesus, please give me an American Girl doll, and I want it before the end of the week. Amen." Oh, honey girl, have you not learned about prayer yet? You gotta wait. I have a friend, B. B's 40, and she's single, and she longs to be married. She knows what it is to wait. One afternoon, she went over to a friend's house, and her friend was getting ready in the next room, and there she saw on her friend's dresser her friend's prayer journal opened. She couldn't help herself. She thought, I'm going to take a look. And there at the top of the page was the heading, Impossible Prayers. And the first item on the list was that B finds a boyfriend. There is nothing quite like finding out that you're getting a boyfriend as the idea of your friend's impossible prayers. I thought that story was so funny when she told it to me that I started an impossible prayer list of my own. And first item of business was that B finds a boyfriend. Still, B waits. She waits. I had a friend here when I lived in Graham Hall, my upstairs neighbor, Mariah. We became friends because our 2 boys were the same age, Ralph and Connor, Connor and Ralph. They were inseparable. Once Ralph told me, "Mom, Connor and I, we both like goldfish. Can you believe it?" Yeah. But when I had the baby shower for Ivy, Mariah didn't have a baby shower. And when I put out the announcement that Ivy was born, Mariah still didn't have anything to announce. And as Ralph and Connor and Ralph grew up side by side, all that grew next to Ivy was a space. Questions. When? Where? Why? Mariah knew. She knows what it is to wait. Do you know what it is to wait? When we open Luke 1, we set the scene on a whole nation that waits. A whole people waiting. They wait for freedom from foreign rule. They wait for a restoration with their God. They wait for a renewal of their identity, of their righteousness. Some even wait for a man who will bring these things to them: freedom, identity, righteousness. All Israel is like a room full of children sitting on the edge of their seat waiting for the bell to ring. They wait. And if you go out of the city just a little way, up a little windy road into the hill country, there you can find a house, a humble house. And sitting in that house are two elderly people, hunched over their dinner table, eating in the quiet. Zechariah and Elizabeth. They wait. They probably ask the same questions my friend Mariah did. When, where, why? It's stupid to ask them now, but they still do. They wait for a son. And they waited well. What does Luke say? They were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. Does this mean they never sinned? No. Does this mean they were perfect? No. Zechariah and Elizabeth aren't perfect people, but they were called righteous and blameless because they were visibly, consistently engaging in holy behaviors and following the law of their God. These were righteous people, faithful people, good people. And I don't know about you, but when I hear stories of good people forced to wait, it makes me get before God and say, how could you? And then before I can even finish that prayer, something begins to happen. Zechariah's ministry team is on duty at the temple, the Abijah division. There were a lot of priests back then. They were divided into 24 groups. Each served at the temple 2 weeks out of the year. Coming out of Easter week, that ministry plan is sounding really good to me. And on this particular day, the sun's moving across the sky, morning worship's done, and all the priests line up as the officer whose job it is to decide who does what enters the space. Now, can you imagine this? That your senior pastor does not determine what you do on a Sunday until immediately before the service, and he determines that by rolling dice, because that is literally what is about to happen. All right, here we go. The casting of lots. He who will slaughter the lamb. Simon will slaughter the lamb. He who will sprinkle the blood. Matthias will sprinkle the blood. He who shall clean the ashes from the altar. All right, Eleazar, you will clean the ashes from the altar. He who shall clean the lamp. Elianias will clean the lamp. He who shall carry the head and one leg. Phineas, you will carry the head and one leg. He who will carry the entrails. Can you imagine being the priest where the lot always falls to you that you will carry the entrails? Alison, you will carry the entrails. Again, no. And so this happens bit by bit, body part by body part, roll by roll. They determine who will do what at the evening service of worship that night. Until we get to the final roll, the final task is so important, they save it till last. You know, some commentators say, you can only do this once in your lifetime, it's that important. The task was this: the height of the evening service, the apex of their worship. One person will bring the prayers of all the people into the holy place to scatter the incense upon the altar there as a symbol of those prayers being offered to the one true God. He who shall scatter the incense. Zechariah, you will scatter the incense upon the altar in the holy place. And then this elderly man comes forward. And the officer looks at him. Zechariah? Of the hill country? You never did this before? No, my lord. Well, Zechariah, today it's you. Zechariah, can you tell that God is on the move? That he's pressing on the fabric of the earth. That he's pressing upon your waiting. Can you see him now standing on the stairs before the altar? But not before the altar, sorry, standing on the stairs before the holy place? Can you imagine his heart racing? How he can't wait to get home to tell his wife, she's never going to believe what happened to me today at work. Oh, Zechariah, you ain't going to believe what happens to you today at work, but we'll get to that later. Can you imagine? He has to carry this thing, right? This pan, this lidded pan, and inside is another dish with the incense. Can you imagine his hands shaking from the adrenaline coursing through his body? And he's standing before this door that he has looked at all his working life and quite possibly never gone in. Can you imagine how obsessed he must have been by that door? I've been at this campus for 7 years. And do you know that door that's on the way into Great Hall? It says wellness room. Has anyone else ever looked at that and wondered what is behind that door? I am obsessed with that door, okay? And John Brankham, we have to talk later. But this door isn't a door just on the side to Great Hall. This is a single door flanked by massive columns on a 15-story high building. Can you imagine? And on this day, and he's got a little assistant to his side, for the first time, his foot crosses the threshold. Suddenly, everything sounds different in that space. Outside, they're praying, they're singing the daily psalm, they're offering up the offering on the altar. There's trumpeters playing their trumpets. And now, it's like being in that heavy silence of a shell. Shh, shh, shh. These two guys, their feet moving towards the altar. Little dish. And then the guy whose job it is to put the coals on the altar, he offers those and prostrates himself and then goes out. And now Zechariah is here alone. Oh, Zechariah, can you feel it? Can you feel God pressing against your waiting? And he takes that lid off the pan, clunk, and he lifts out the incense, and he begins to scatter it across the altar. And as he does so, a shadow is cast across his arm. And there, the angel speaks. Zechariah, your prayer has been heard. Zechariah, can you see? God has pressed against your waiting. He is busting through that thing. He is answering your prayer. Do you see that God has burst the very fabric of the reality of this world with an answer to your prayer? But hang on a minute. What prayer? What prayer? Your prayer has been heard. What prayer? I mean, there's the prayer that Zechariah is meant to be praying in this moment. The prayer he is ordained to pray. The prayer of all those people praying out there. Prayers for this nation. For freedom, for righteousness, for justice, for identity, for restoration with their God. Is that the prayer that is answered today? What prayer? Or is it the other prayer? The prayer Zechariah is not meant to be praying. But the smoldering wick in this heart that he cannot snuff out. A prayer for a son. The teeny tiny prayer. Forgive me, Father, for I was meant to be praying a prayer for all the people. But my heart just prayed a prayer for myself. Here is the amazing thing about our excellent and wonderful God. He answers both. He answers both. He answers both the prayer of all the people, and he answers Zechariah's personal prayer. The waiting of all Israel and the waiting of this couple. God presses through with an answer to both. Now, where do we go from here? We can talk about how we're all like Israel. All of us had the same prayer as them. prayers for freedom, prayers for restoration, prayers for justice, prayers for righteousness. We can talk about how that longing was answered for us in the man to whom Zechariah's son will point. How this is the beginning of God breaking through with Jesus Christ, with the one who will bring Israel and us freedom, healing, justice, identity, adoption, community. I mean, these are the deep, deep undercurrents of our prayers, are they not? And they are answered in Jesus. And I can tell you how all the things we are waiting for, the things we still wait for, will finally be realized in Jesus' return. This is our great and certain hope. How in the new heavens and new earth there'll be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. Your waiting will be done like an old sandwich dumped out of the refrigerator at your house. It's it. It's over. This is the most important thing. This is the answer to Israel's prayer. He is our certain hope. Jesus is the answer to our waiting. But that would neglect the other prayer, would it not? That's saying only one prayer got answered on that day. At some point, we've got to wrestle through the other prayer that was answered. Zechariah's quiet, relentless, personal prayer. What are we going to say about that? Here's the thing Zechariah's personal prayer says to me. It says the same thing that a good book says to me. I read a lot of books, new books, and that means I read a lot of terrible books. But then sometimes I read a really good new book, and the world changes for me. It says it's possible to find another really great new book. It's the same thing that a new friend says to me. I can go a long time not making a new deep friendship. And then I meet somebody for whom I could talk to all night. The world is different then, isn't it? Suddenly, the world becomes a place where it's possible to make a new, great friend. And this is what Zechariah's prayer says to me. It says, Alison, it's possible. It's possible. You too could experience God breaking through your waiting with an answer to your prayer. It's possible. Now, I know that is hard to believe because we've got this other voice going on in here that says it's not possible. That's the story of all those disappointments and all those unanswered prayers. It says, it's not possible. I'm your only story. And let's go back into this holy place. Zechariah listened to that story, did he not? That spoke to him louder than an angel in the holy place of God. But I want to tell you this morning, if anything, hear this other voice. Hear that there is another story. There is Zechariah's story. His personal prayer got answered in that day. So believe in the possibility that God can yet again break through your waiting with an answer to your prayer. You know, God is kind to me. And when I start tipping the scales the wrong way, he brings me little reminders. Alison, it's possible. I get a phone call from my friend B. Alison, you're never going to believe this, but I'm getting married. What? Yeah, it's weird. I was arguing with this guy, and then it turned out he liked Chesterton. B and I are very alike. She says, and then he builds furniture, and he rides a motorbike, and he rode me on the back of the motorbike to Big Sur, and he got down on his knees, and he said, I want you to be my wife. And I just spent the whole phone conversation saying, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. And I went to my bedside drawer, and I opened it out, and I pulled out this crumpled bit of paper that said, impossible prayers on the top, got a pencil, crossed it off. What? And then I looked at that thing, and I realized God had answered 3 of my impossible prayers. Number 2 was Mariah. Mariah gets a baby. 6 months before that, she had Skyped me crying. Alison, I'm 20 weeks pregnant and the baby is healthy and it's going to be a boy. And he was born. His name is Brendan, great non-seminary name. And he has this shock of red hair that sticks right up. He looks like Beaker from the Muppets. It's great. Every time I look at that little face, that face preaches to me. It says, Alison, can you not believe it is possible just one more time I could break through your waiting with an answer to your prayer? Number 3 was a prayer of my own. Tossed it onto that sheet. 3 years ago, I think, maybe 2. Time passes here in this weird bubble in a weird way. I was taking pastoral ministry with Jim Singleton. Every class I left crying, every single one. It hurt my heart to hear about a job so beautiful that I was convinced I would never do. Never. I once went to preach at this church down in Boston and they made a mistake on their, lettering sign and billed me like that I was their pastor. It said, Reverend Alison Gerber. I stood out the front of that sign. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. But you know what? It was also like a sick joke because I just couldn't believe it was possible. And now every Sunday, I walk into a church that on a permanent sign says, Second Congregational Church, everyone welcome, our pastor, Alison Gerber. Whatever, don't clap about that. Clap for God. It is possible. All right, this is my story. Do you need my story? Take it. Take it. All right? Let it outweigh the story that speaks to you in your heart. Do you need Zechariah's story? Take that too. Do you need B's story? Take that. Take Mariah's story. What about Abraham and Sarah? You met them? Take their story. Moses, he had a quest for justice. Anyone here got one of those? Take his story. What about Jairus and his dead daughter? Take that. What about this woman, bleeding woman? She didn't even pray. All she could do was just a desperate hand grabbing the garment of God as it passed. Take that. Take that. Take Jesus. All humanity's prayers answered, 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 answered. If you can believe in that, could you not believe one more time? Just one more time, just enough to hope that God can yet again break through with an answer to your prayers. Amen.